We have several epidemics in our day of degenerative diseases. They seem to be related. We're going to be talking about these, such things as diabetes, in the next half an hour, and we'd be happy if you joined us. I'm Agatha Thrash, a staff physician at Uchee Pines Institute in Alabama.
The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented. Welcome to Help Yourself to Health with Dr. Agatha Thrash of Uchee Pines Institute. And now, here's your host, Dr. Thrash.
When we talk of diabetes, everybody always thinks of sugar, and well that they should, because excessive sugar is a problem for people who have diabetes. But just as much a problem as sugar is that of fat. So we need to talk about fat as well. Now, fats can come in the form of margarine and mayonnaise, fried foods, cooking fats, salad oils. All of these are free fats or visible fats, and any of these can be a problem to the diabetic, especially if the diabetic is overweight, and with type 2 diabetes that is a very frequent finding. Now, I have asked Valerie Schreiber, who is one of my colleagues at Uchee Pines, to help me in demonstrating some things about foods, and my granddaughter Melissa Thrash, who will also help to demonstrate some things about foods. And we would like to show you about some things about these two troublesome areas, fats and sugars. And of course, we could spend quite a long time. We could spend the rest of the day just giving you recipes. But two very simple things, and one is a nut butter and the other is a dessert. So Valerie Schreiber will talk with you about nut butters.
Thank you, Dr. Agatha. I'd like to share with you how you can make very good nut butter out of almonds, and much more inexpensive than you can go to the health food store or your regular grocery store and buy nut butters. They can be quite expensive, especially the almonds and the pecans. But what you can do at home is you can buy a bag of almonds and take your almonds and put them on a loaf pan in the oven about 250 degrees for about 2 hours or a little bit more, and you can test them at that time and it'll toast them just right. And then all you have to do is, if you have a Champion juicer, is just put them through the Champion juicer, and you can watch me in just a moment just how I'm going to do this. Go ahead and put some nuts in.
Wow, that comes right out as nut butter. I'm amazed. Yes, it looks just like peanut butter.
It's just that simple, as you can see. Makes beautiful butter. And right over here, I have made an almond butter pie. And it is absolutely delicious. It's made with tofu and some almond butter.
My, that is beautiful. Is it frozen?
It's frozen.
Uh-huh.
You freeze it and then you eat it frozen, just like you would a peanut butter pie. The famous peanut butter pie, this is the almond butter pie.
This is beautiful, and it's tasty, and it's also helpful. So we can be very happy for almond butter pie.
Yes, and then we can
Like
put
a
a
peanut
dip
butter pie.
of banana ice cream on it.
Oh, a dip of banana ice cream on it. Now, a diabetic can eat this?
Yes, a diabetic can eat this because of the tofu that is in it will cause the blood sugar not to rise as rapidly, and because of the nuts that are in it will not rise as rapidly.
Very good. And that means then the glycemic index will not be so high. And we'll talk a little bit later about the glycemic index and what that means. Now, we have here something else that's very interesting and important, and that is a sugar substitute. Now, in the same Champion juicer that we have used to make the almond butter, now we can make a banana ice cream. It's a hands-down favorite in our home to have this kind of dessert. In fact, we can make a whole meal of this kind of dessert. What do you have here, Melissa?
I have just frozen these bananas overnight, and I did it in a Ziploc freezer bag. You can do it to anything other than bananas. Berries work very well too. I'm just going to run them through the Champion juicer, and we're going to get the butter out.
And actually, I like to have the butter, the almond butter, I like to have that in my ice cream. As soon as it's all through, then I just sort of mix it up nicely, and it's really quite good. Ah, there come the bananas now. Now the bananas go through very quickly, and you can see it's beginning to look like banana ice cream now. It actually looks like vanilla ice cream. And with the almond butter in it, we call it almond butter ice cream.
So it'd be good for diabetics because bananas happen to be high in sugar, and so mixed with some almonds would be good.
Yes, okay. That's a very good illustration. My, that looks just like vanilla ice cream. And having had a good bit of experience with it, I know it tastes like ice cream too.
Tastes delicious.
Can you do anything else with this other than just put it through plain?
Yes, actually I have made it into a dessert.
Oh yes, banana split. Oh, that eaten with a cracker or a cookie would be quite satisfying for a diabetic.
Sure.
Can you make any other kind of ice cream besides banana?
Yes, you can use berries and mangoes and peaches and anything else that you would freeze overnight in the freezer.
And diabetics can use all of those. Actually, the diabetic some diabetics are extremely sensitive to some fruits, but fruits like strawberries and blueberries and most kinds of berries, blackberries, most diabetics can eat those very well, and they can be mixed with a little banana ice cream, which makes them creamy. Bananas work up creamy with a juicer better than any others, but it's only the Champion juicer that will make this kind of creamy ice cream. So you'll want to use that kind of fruit as a part of the base. But you can put in a little bit of banana, then some strawberries, a little bit more banana, then some more strawberries, and you can have strawberry ice cream, and it's very nice, and most diabetics can eat it very well. In fact, most diabetics can even eat this, but it depends on the severity and the sensitivity that the diabetic has. Now with blueberries, it's exactly the same thing. A little bit of banana, then some blueberries, a little more banana, and a little more blueberries, and it is a beautiful blue color and is really quite delightful. I hope this little illustration has been of help to you so that you can understand that not everything about delicious food has to be unhealthful, but that we can have some very healthful things that are easy to make and that give us a lot of nutrients and do not cause the diabetic to have a violation of their general principles. Now, diabetes is of two general types, the type 1 and the type 2. We used to call the type 1 the juvenile diabetes and the type 2 the adult onset diabetes. And we can still do that, but you will find that if you classify them in the two different varieties, that it makes it easier for you to know how to treat it. Now, my husband and I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Diabetes and the Hypoglycemic Syndrome. In this book, we tried to gather everything from all over the world, every remedy that we could think of that would be helpful for a diabetic, every practice that they could use that would help them with their diabetes, and put it all in one book. And that is this book, Diabetes and the Hypoglycemic Syndrome. And as you read through this, you will find some very helpful things, whether you're a type 1 or a type 2 diabetic. We have written all those things that are written for type 2 diabetics can also help those that have type 1 diabetes not to have the complications of diabetes to accelerate. We should think of diabetes as accelerated aging, because essentially that is what it is. It is a degenerative disease related to other degenerative diseases in a syndrome called Syndrome X. Syndrome X, because of too much insulin, is characterized by not only diabetes but also hypertension, heart disease, that's with a high LDL and a low HDL. So the bad cholesterol is up, the good cholesterol is down in Syndrome X, and then also cancer and overweight. These are also difficulties that people have who have Syndrome X. Now with the type 1 diabetic or the juvenile diabetic, it often comes on rather suddenly. In fact, it may be almost explosive. They may have a little bit of warning, but then when the diabetes really comes on rather quickly, they may get sick and even prostrate very quickly. So adults need to be aware that small children even can have a serious problem there. A friend of mine, a pediatrician, went with his wife on a small trip. They were planning to be gone only 4 days. They left an aunt in charge of their 2 small children. One was 3 years old, the other 5. The 3-year-old was not feeling very well when they left home. In fact, for a day or so, he had just been a little what they thought was just puny. They lived in Savannah, Georgia, and it was summertime, and so they thought, well, maybe the heat, he's playing too hard in the heat. And so when they left, he didn't have an appetite, and he would not eat, and the aunt encouraged him to eat just a little bit, which he promptly threw up. And they had been they had spent one night in the motel at the place where they were vacationing for those 3 or 4 days, when they got a call from their aunt. And she said, John is still not well. In fact, he is worse. I think you should come home and see him. Well, the doctor said, no, you're just overly concerned. He's going to be all right. So he allayed her fears, and but in a couple of hours, she called again. Well, she couldn't get in touch with him right away, so she was persistent and sent someone for them. And again, the doctor thought, well, she's just being overly concerned. So he listened to her on the phone and tried to allay her fears, but she said, no, I really want you to come home now. So nothing to do but the 2 of them to pack and go back home. So my friend said that he walked in the door and he sort of had his hands on his hips, and he said to his aunt, now show me where this sick boy is. Well, he took one look at his son and he said, my son is very ill. So they went directly to the hospital, got a blood sugar, found that it was over 400, and the boy was already in acidosis, and it was a little bit nip and tuck to get him so that he was straightened out again. So it can be that a child can get a very sudden case, very sudden onset of type 1 diabetes. Now, there are certain precursors of type 1 diabetes, and Don Miller, who is my associate at UT Pines, a lifestyle counselor and a health educator, and he will now talk with you about some of the precursors of diabetes type 1.
Okay, Dr. Thrash, there are various things that will precurse or perhaps lead to diabetes type 1. We don't know all the reasons why a person develops type 1. Of course, we realize that it can be an inherited trait that a person receives from a parent, and they've got type 1 diabetes. And we can't do much about things that we inherit. But there are 4 more factors that they have come up with that they theorize are things that may be causing children to develop type 1 diabetes. One is a recent infection of some type. And because we realize that, let me just go back and explain what type 1 is a little bit. Dr. Thrash has talked about it, but we have in our pancreas, we have some beta cells. And it's our beta cells that produce the insulin, which takes the glucose into our cells. It's when the beta cells are no longer there or do not produce insulin, we have type 1 diabetes, which means the person's going to be diabetes dependent for the rest of their lives. So some type of an infection might harm those beta cells. It can also be, and we don't understand all of this, but science has showed us a child who goes to daycare is more likely to come down with type 1 diabetes than a child who does not go to daycare. A child who drinks milk, dairy milk, after 9 years of age in large quantities has a bigger chance of developing type 1 diabetes. And really scary is a child before 6 months of age who takes in dairy milk has a larger chance of developing type 1 diabetes. Now, why might that be? Why might it be that taking in dairy products would cause us to develop type 1 diabetes? Well, there's a reason for this. The milk protein is a 17 amino acid peptide chain. That's what it looks like to the body. And the body recognizes, for the most part, that protein to be an enemy. And it sends out its immune response to it, produces cells, antibodies to that protein to try to protect ourselves from that. Trouble is, down in Pancreas Street, where we have those beta cells, the beta cells are made up of a 17 amino acid peptide chain, very similar to the milk protein. And so as these antibodies produced by the beta cells of the immune system are out looking for the antigens which are on the milk proteins, they find the beta cells in the pancreas and they attack the beta cells, and it's basically an autoimmune disease where auto means we're fighting ourselves, and a child that cannot do anything about it but should be receiving dairy milk which should be fed to a calf is now receiving the very thing which is going to destroy its beta cells and cause that child for the rest of its life to be an insulin-dependent diabetic, type 1 diabetic. And so these 5 things, some of them we can do something about, and all that we can do, we need to do to protect our children from something as terrible as type 1 juvenile diabetes, Dr. Thrash.
Yes. One of the things that we know about how to handle a diabetic is some understanding of the glycemic index. And I'm going to go to the board now and draw for you a graph so that you can see just what the glycemic index is. And you need to know before that there is a certain spread of the laboratory tests that will help you to know what proper blood glucose is. Notice here that the laboratory gives as its normal 65 to 109, but your ideal level is 70 to 85. With triglycerides, which is another problem that diabetics often have, the laboratory will give as its normals 0 to 149, but up to 100 is our ideal, and over that is getting to be too much. Creatinine, which is a waste product filtered by the kidney, the laboratory will give you 0.5 to 1.5, but I don't like to see the creatinine higher than 1.2, and especially if it's going up year by year. That makes me think that the kidneys are not functioning as briskly as they had been. Then the uric acid level, which is another aspect of all of this syndrome X, the uric acid level at 2.4 to 8.2, that is what the laboratory gives, but I don't like to see it any higher than 5. So if it's higher than 5, then it may be a problem for you. Now, the glycemic index is not what the blood glucose is. We say that 70 to 85 is the blood glucose, but as we look at the board, I will show you just what we mean when we say the glycemic index, because the glycemic index gives us another parameter that helps us to control diabetes. So let us say that here is the graph, and here is your fasting blood sugar right here, this line. So you eat a meal or you eat a food, and that food takes your blood sugar up and then brings it back down again. Now the glycemic index is the whole area of the the graph that represents the level that the food goes and your fasting level. So let's say that this food is nuts and that this food is white sugar. Now the level will come back down the same, but it has gone up quite a lot, and in fact it may even come down quicker, but since it has gone up a lot, it has a lot greater area under the curve than a nut would have. And you may get the same nourishment from them both so far as the energy that you get, but you do not have the same influence on your body. So the glycemic index is one thing that we want to study. And Valerie Schreiber is going to help me show you some foods that have a low or a high glycemic index. So Valerie, what can you tell us here about these foods that you have?
Well, I'm first going to show you the different foods that are high and the foods that are low on the glycemic index, and it's simply a marker telling us, as Dr. Agatha said, how fast our sugar goes up according to what foods we eat. And some of them are quite surprising as to the ones that will do that to us. And an example is potato, as I have right here. It is high on the glycemic index. So is corn, and so are carrots. Now, does that mean that, oh, I can't ever have a potato or a carrot or corn again? No, it doesn't mean that. But it means that if you're going to eat these vegetables, then you have to figure out a food that would be high fiber so that it will slow the rise in your blood sugar. And so you don't want to eat a whole meal of foods that are going to cause your blood sugar to go very quickly up. You want to eat foods that will cause it to go slower. And so those are your high fiber foods. And God has given us that in His vegetable kingdom as well. So now what you would want to do is, let's say, oh, I want a corn on the cob, or I want a baked potato. How you would do that is you would go ahead and have yourself like a spinach salad, or, you know, a good salad that would have broccoli, cauliflower in it, or you could take some lentils or soy. And both of these are very low on the glycemic index. And so you could make burgers, loaves, all sorts of things you can make out of soy. Soy is extremely low on it and so beneficial for many other things for our body as well. And lentils are extremely tasty. And so you could have this and a nice salad, and then you could go ahead and have your ear of corn or your baked potato. And it would be quite permissible to do that. Now, another area to consider on the glycemic index is bread. And unfortunately, even in the whole grain breads, it will tend to rise it a little swifter. So if you want to eat bread, you would do the same thing that I explained to you just a minute ago. You would go ahead and have a good salad with lots of fiber, and or a good legume like pintos or something with soy. Tofu would be another good one. But another good substitute for bread would be wasa. That is very high in fiber, and this is rye, and it's very high in fiber and very low on the glycemic index. So you could alternate having bread and then have wasa at another time so that you could still enjoy having something either crunchy or kind of bready.
What if you put the almond butter that you previously made on the bread?
Now you could go ahead and put almond butter on here, and that would slow it. And so you could go ahead and have your almond butter on your bread, and it would be permissible to eat that. Now, another thing is, you know, people love pancakes and waffles. Well, the standard pancake mixes and waffles are very questionable, and they will go ahead and shoot your sugar up high. So the best ones to get, and I'm telling you, they make the best waffles and pancakes you ever ate, happens to be buckwheat flour and soy flour. And what's so nice about soy flour is that it acts like a leveling in there. It'll rise them up and make them nice and fluffy and soft, and you can make the best pancakes and you can make the best waffles out of soy flour.
You don't have to use baking soda or baking
powder?
powder?
No, you do not have to use it.
The soy
The
puffs up a little bit?
The soy just puffs them up and makes them nice and fluffy.
And the steam from your waffle iron does the rest?
Oh yes, and they're delicious, and they don't affect the...
Makes me hungry just to think
I
of it.
know it, it does me too.
And we'll have some banana ice cream on that waffle?
You could have banana ice cream on that waffle. Yes, you could have banana ice cream on that waffle and put some strawberries on top, and you would be just fine. Let me see, there's fiber, as we said a few minutes ago, does slow the glycemic index. Another thing, that eating a large meal will rise your sugar, your glycemic index. So it's important that if you're having problems with diabetes, that you want to eat smaller meals. Now this doesn't mean, okay, I can eat 6 meals a day. No, it means the regular meals that you're eating, whether it be 2 or 3, you eat smaller meals. And then you will find that your sugar level will not rise as rapidly. So
those are very good things to know about the glycemic index and how we can handle this, and how we can make it so that even though we may eat something that has a pretty high glycemic index, if we manage our diet in just the right way, then we're going to be able to take care of things well. Now, type 1 diabetes is never handled with a fast. But type 2 diabetes can very properly be handled with a fast. In fact, that's one of the standard treatments that we use for that. And I would like to tell you just a little bit about some of the experiences that we have had with fasting. We have had many people who have come to UT Pines, type 2 diabetics, who are on 70 or 80 or 90 units of insulin. We give them a fast, and of course they don't take insulin, they don't take food during that time. They only take water and clear herb teas, and as they take these, then when we finish with the fast, and sometimes that's 2 days, sometimes it's 3 days, sometimes it may be up to 5 days that we will have the person to fast. But as soon as they come off the fast, we may find that their insulin requirements have halved, so that we are no longer using 70 or 80 or 90 units, but now we may be using 20 or 30 or 40 for that individual. And as we continue to help them to lose weight and to exercise more, as we do these things, then the person slowly gets off insulin. Once in a while, we'll have a person who has a lot of the oral anti-diabetic agents that they're using, and we need to have them take a fast too. For these individuals, if they come to our center, then we can easily fast them 4 or 5 days when they're right under our care. But if they're at home, then we tell the person not to fast more than a day or 2 per week. So they can fast on Monday, and then they could fast again perhaps on Thursday. And again, the person who is on these agents can usually stop taking them gradually as they get better in control of themselves. I hope that your understanding of diabetes has been increased, and that you will improve your glycemic index.